Hi Raja, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, good. How are you?
All going good. And thank you very much for agreeing for this session. So let me just start with it because API is something which we hear every day, whether it is for the usability or the benefits it's giving it, or from an attack perspective. So or a risk perspective. So from both or from all perspectives, we keep on hearing about API. I know, Raja, you work on very high-end penetration testings and yeah, the bug bounties and exploits and all of that thing. But I thought that this is a time we need to get into the basics to start discussing about API and the security concern of it. One of the reasons is many security professionals are not from the software development background, and there is some misconceptions or some lack of understand or broader understanding of the API security is lacking. So I thought we will take the session to just go through the basics of API and why it is a concern for many security professionals and a harvest phase for most of the attackers. Okay, so
Yeah.
now let me ask or start with the question saying, what is API in a plain layman's concern,
Yep, yep.
point of view?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a great starting point to understand why we are here today. Let's talk about APIs or application programming interfaces. So APIs are essentially a set of rules and standards that allow different software application to communicate to each other. You can think of API as a translator or a middleman facilitating these conversations. So now, why we should care about APIs? Um, APIs are everywhere nowadays, and they have become integral part of an application and its functions today. Uh, every time you check a weather in your phone or book a hotel or accessing a travel website or make a payment online, there is an API working in the background, making it all possible. They connect applications, allowing them to exchange data and functionality. So APIs, while being the key enablers, can also be point of vulnerabilities as well. They are essentially doorways into the applications and its functionalities. And if it's unsecured, if it left unsecured, can be exploited to gain unauthorized access, steal sensitive information, or disrupt the services itself. So if you are listening to this and you are a CTO of an organization or an API developer, your job is to make sure that the APIs are well guarded, securing APIs from these standpoints, like authentication, who can use these APIs, and also authorization, what they can do with these APIs, and the security of the data or data that are handled by the API, ensuring that sensitive information that passes through these APIs is well protected.
So the way you explain you have explained in a very layman concept. It looks very simple. So it is a translator between the user request or the front interface and the back interface. And the way I understand that also, this is a very small code, maybe maximum of 100-line code is what an API code looks like. Okay. So is it generally a simple one type of APIs, or are there different type of APIs? So when somebody says API, should I understand that only there is one category, one breed, one type of APIs, or is there a difference within APIs?
Uh, like like uh, yeah there are indeed different type of APIs, and understanding them is a key to developing and securing your applications APIs secure effectively. Let's run through the common type of APIs. Firstly, there are what we call web APIs. or also known as HTTP APIs or REST APIs. These API work over the internet, allowing different software applications to communicate with each other. Uh, they have been using increasingly, and it's very popular due to their simplicity and in the widespread use of HTTP. And then the other one is SOAP APIs, which are a bit older but still used actively, and especially in enterprise applications. SOAP, or Symbol Object Access Protocol, is a protocol for exchanging structured information in web services using XML format. It's known for its robustness and high security, which make it suitable for applications where these characteristics are critical. And the other one is new in the area, like GraphQL APIs, a new kind of API developed by Facebook itself. And GraphQL allows clients to request exactly what data they required, like making it quite efficient. It's been gaining popularity, and it used by organizations like GitHub, and many other big organizations as well. And the other type is gRPC APIs, which is developed by Google, which uses protocol buffers, data format, and provides features like authentication, load balancing, and more. They are known for their high performance and well suited for microservices architecture, mainly used to communicate between the microservices easily. And these different type of APIs has different characteristics as mentioned, which can impact their security as well. For example, SOAP APIs has built-in security features but can be more complex to work with. On the other hand, REST APIs are simpler and more flexible, but security part need to be implemented separately or taken care of the authentication and authorization code-based sections.
So, Raja, then when you have a SOAP API with a built-in security feature, why does people use the other APIs and create an issue? Is it based on the type of language you're using or the type of the purpose you are building?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that the reason why they use different? Because when I know that that a much advanced API development method is available, why do people go for the other ones?
It's not that much advanced, like it's because it's complexity. Like even it's easy, like in the perspective of security side, but the implementation side of it is very complex. And most probably, even they have security features, if they are not configured properly, it will lead to other kind of issues as well. So that's why Rust is popular. Like it's easy to implement, and now there are standards which provide the authentication and authorization part of the Rust APIs. So now the main thing is how we do configure the REST APIs properly. So many times I've seen like people uses authorization and authentication mechanism other than the default ones or the standard ones. They are trying to reinvent the wheel by their own for the authentication and authorization methods. That may lead to issues. That's why the security part of the Rust is a bit weaker.
So, Raja, I don't know whether that assumption is correct from my side. So, the complexity and the lack of development expertise is also one of the reason why people may choose an API which is not by de facto with more security features. Is that a fair assumption, or is it
Uh,
purely depending on the environment they operate in?
yeah, that's also one other reason. Like in enterprise applications, SOAP may be possible, or they can use SOAP APIs, but there is limitations as well in the level of programming language, application architecture. So that's also need to consider, like this is kind of security vs usability or implementation speed kind of scenario.
Got it. So, Raja, very commonly I hear another parameters called internal APIs and the external APIs. And I was told that the percentage between internal to external APIs, you will have around 80. Yeah, so almost a huge difference, the number of internal APIs compared to external API in any applications on that. Can you throw some lights on the difference between the internal API to external APIs?
Sure, sure. Akame, I think Akame suggests that around 83% of the APIs are private. It's internal in nature. Like internal APIs are used within the application or services. They enable different components of an application or software system to communicate and share data with each other. So it's the internal APIs. They are these APIs are not exposed to external users. So they are somewhat isolated from the public internet and generally have lower risk profile. But it's not like they don't have any risk. It's like it poses its own risk as well. So external APIs, or on the other hand, are exposed to in the internet and can be used by external users or systems. So these APIs allow third-party developers to interact with the application or software or service. A good example is like Twitter API or Facebook API, which allow third-party apps to post or read user profile and then other actions in the API Twitter and Facebook. So now the different type of the difference between these two type of APIs are important implications in the security side as well. Like external APIs are exposed to a wider range of potential attackers and therefore generally have high risk. So normally organizations consider this as high risk and use it to secure them in a better way. This external API require robust authentication and authorization mechanism and strong encryption and more to protect its own. But in internal APIs, why being more protected as it in internal, normally many application won't use any authentication as well in internal APIs. But that is not correct. These APIs has risks, especially against insider threat or case of attacker.
Raja, on the attacker perspective, I'll come to that because I have one major reservation on that. Because we are currently in an environment or a terrain where there is nothing called internal or external. And we assume that we are in a hostile environment. That's the fundamental principles or the assumptions in zero trust. So we are also, many organizations are going through a situation where the lateral movements or the internal compromise has already happened. Potential for lateral movement is extremely high. So in that case, if the fundamental assumption is that external, I need to put more encryption and authentication, and internal is my internal, so I don't have to worry. Fundamentally, there is a problem which we can discuss later on that. Now, let me come back and ask this question. From the beginning, you explained API as a simple translator who is like a messenger in between the front end and the back end, doing a very simple task, a simple program. Why is it a target? And what is the security concern related to API? Because I am a small guy. My purpose is only translate or do mediate between two services. So why is that being a target?
So why should security team concern in particular about APIs, right? Like if we consider API as a door to a house, there are three main aspects security teams need to be considered. Like ensure that the right people have the key to the door, and define what each person can do with that access, and also ensure the information passes through the door is well protected. So but it increasingly challenging when it comes to the API as APIs has multiple uh, like API number of APIs are multiplied, and the number of API grows like exponentially. uh, if we took the data, the salt security noted that around 211 percentage increase in the API in just 1 year. This growth is uh, the increase of the attack surface in the API. So, another study from Imbawa related to this, 69 percentage of the companies have more than 100 APIs exposed. Yet only 37 percentage of the organization feel they can secure the APIs adequately. So this gap is indicates that APIs are exposed at the rate of and it's out of control of the organizations. Most companies fail to secure them. So most of them don't know which all are the APIs exposed in their
So,
application as well.
so Raja, if I understand correctly, the exposure is one thing you have mentioned that okay, naturally with API coming, the external API is coming in a big way, we have increased our attack surface in a considerable way from API perspective itself. Okay, and you also mentioned saying that a compromise on an API can, because traditionally we have heard, or the assumption was always saying if I have a WAF in place, it will take care of all the web application attacks. I don't have to worry about anything more. Okay. Now, is that the scenario right now? And also the question earlier you mentioned about different type of APIs. And then we are talking about internal APIs and external APIs. Now, there is a big environmental change, which is the on-prem and the cloud, and also the hybrid cloud. So all of this has another set of APIs coming into picture. Is the security consideration while developing, while defending, while detecting, defending, mitigating the same, or does it differ?
It's all different. REST APIs, on the other hand, are simple, flexible, and widely adopted. The case of REST APIs, but they rely on the HTTP protocol and uh, don't provide any security features as building, but we have to implement a security token or kind of implementations. So there is possibilities of potential errors in this area. And as I mentioned, GraphQL APIs poses unique challenge because they allow client to specifically ask data they want. This can lead to potential overexposure of data if not handled securely. So, in case of GraphQL as well, we have to define which user has access to what kind of data in internal. So even if some user requests for specific data which is not intended to expose to the specific user, we have to handle it in the backend. Moreover, the complexity of GraphQL queries can also be exploited to create a denial of service kind of attacks. So, in other hand, gRPC APIs uses protocol buffer data format, which is less common and might require additional consideration for parsing and handling the data securely. Like like now regarding the internal and external APIs, external APIs are exposed and hence potential attack is worldwide. They require robust authentication and rate limitation to prevent abuse. Many cases, most APIs are not rate limited. If an attacker has access to that, he can request that API and post an additional usage kind of issues or denial of service or if email sending API or API which sends an email is exposed, attacker can use that API to send thousands of emails to the customer. So right limiting is a major
So,
part.
Raja, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is based on the API used, the information it could disclose or the damage it could do is totally different.
Exactly.
So,
Yep.
in considering that, should the security team ask this question very specifically, the type of APIs a software or a service uses, and provide because ideally, the way I understood, starting from the threat modeling itself, we need to have a consideration for APIs used, because the
Yeah.
nature is changing completely on that. And also then when we are coming, the way we test it, the way we defend it also need to be changed. So then the interesting question coming to picture, what are there, because always I look at this thing, there are two schools of thoughts, or different schools of thoughts on saying that. One, I can say that I don't care what is my environment, whether it is good, bad, ugly, I don't care. I am going to put more and more controls in ahead of it, or I'll protect my perimeter, or I'll put additional people resources in all way, and try to defend against any attack coming out. Or the second school of thought is saying that, okay, I am going to make sure that my environment is resilient enough, so the potential chances of getting attacked is limited, and even it happens, I can withstand it to a great extent. So now, earlier discussions, what I understood is that the common practice we are seeing is that for an external API, we may go back and say, let me put the authentication, let me put the encryption and all of that. And internal API, which is the biggest number in percentage wise, around 80% higher than the external API, I don't care much, because considering that is an internal API. But in reality, we have a lot of lateral movements happening within the organization. Now, are there, so in both the school of thoughts, we can see, normally companies will say, why should I be bothered? I can buy technologies which will do this activity. I have n number of products in the market which can be procured to protect this. Now, apart from WAF, are there any other products which can be considered to protect against the API related threats? Because most of the attacks we have seen in the recent past has an API component related to it in the attack. So are there different tools, or should we the approach be that let me go internally and validate the type of APIs being used, and try to ensure that at least the configurations and the robustness is there on the API side, which is the right way to do it? Or before
Um,
that, you can also, Raja, touch saying what are the common mistakes people do when they are developing APIs or developing or configuring APIs?
okay. Okay. Mainly, what should organization do to secure an APIs? Like nowadays, like you mentioned, most of the case they it's considered in the infrastructure side, like implementing a WAF, or implementing a gateway that will protect the API. That's the kind of thought, but it's not it's not the right way. Like we have to secure the API, like design in a design this APIs in a secure way from the beginning itself. Like when we start designing the APIs, we have to consider the security part of it, other than considering it at the end of the deployment, or once it deployed, and considering the security part of it's not the right way. Like we have to implement it in the starting stage, or design it in the secure way. The first step in testing API is comprehensive audit of APIs that organization uses. Uh, like many cases, organizations are not fully aware of the APIs or the API inventory they have. So once you have the clear list of inventory or a list of API, then only we can secure it, right? So most cases, what they do is like implement a listener, and implement a listener in the API load balancer or API endpoint, to identify which APIs are exposed, and uh, 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 test those APIs on a real-time model. So like so the important thing is like we have to identify uh, the list of APIs which is exposed and which is not exposed. So the one of the major issues I found during the testing is like unknowingly exposing the internal APIs to the external, because maybe a small configuration change maybe end up with the exposing the wrong API to the external uh, interface. Like nowadays, most of the architectures are based on the microservices or a serverless architecture. So when we configure it, we need to be considered like um, this need to be protected. If the internal APIs that need to be protected, then how to design that the application in a way that it will not expose any APIs and internal APIs in an unknowingly to the internet.
Rajay, are there coding practices or best practice or defined document documented thing available for API coding practices? And the similar way, also the top 10 vulnerabilities related to API, are there that considerations enough to look at in developing secured APIs? The
Uh,
OWASP top 10s, those type
Often,
of things, are they enough to take as a benchmark to look at saying that, okay, when we are developing an API?
a vast API security risk in the API security top list, that will be enough for up to an 80 percentage of the vulnerabilities. Uh, like the top list, like the authorization insufficient authentication or authorization is the main one in the WASP API security risk. And another common mistake is validating not validating the sensitive data inputs, and overexposed APIs as mentioned earlier, um, and the other one is like not considering the security in the from.
So Raja, now for a developer or a security practitioners to give a guidance to a developer saying that you have to develop a secured API. Are
Yeah.
there documents available which they can follow up
Uh,
and say that, okay, I'm going to take this as my best practice or the benchmark to while developing it? Or is not a comprehensive thing at this point of time?
For developers, it's better to stick with the secure coding practices itself. That's also the same way we do in the application security side. So, but like most of the vulnerabilities are also connected, almost similar to that of the web application side. So for the developers, it's better to stick with the OWASP testing guide, or standards that enforce the secure coding practices from the developer perspective. But for a security testing perspective, a WASP API top 10 testing will be covering around 80 percentage of the vulnerabilities which is um, exposed due to APIs vulnerabilities.
Raja, earlier you mentioned about the inventory or visibility of APIs used. We are currently in a world, the organization is struggling to have a proper inventory of their desktops or even the servers. We know many attacks has happened on orphan systems where the management or the team always thought was decommissioned servers, but it was orphaned zombies inside which got attacked. And around 15 to 20% variation we always see when we are auditing any organization's inventory side, the desktops or the endpoints which is on the end. Software bill of materials is still is a concept in paper where people wanted to have a list of all softwares used. Now we are getting into a granular component of API inventory, and especially when there is an 80-20 percentage of difference between external to internal or internal to external. Uh, so what is a practice? Because I don't think it is currently a followed practice where the organization will create the list of all APIs used and with all the details and kept in a register. I don't think that is happening. Are there tools available or any inbuilt native capability in where we can actually scan out to find out? Or from Beagle's perspective, where you come from, so normally when you are taking an engagement, do you really go there to inventorize the API population or API within the services? So how does it work?
Yeah, like you mentioned, the API inventory is inventory monitoring, or API asset discovery is one of the main issue with the companies. Uh, because then, as I mentioned earlier, the number of APIs that's used in an organization is increasing, and it's changing on a daily basis, and new APIs are getting added on a daily basis, and changes are made on the existing APIs as well. So inventory or API asset monitoring is very important, and there are tools available, as I mentioned, like which are sitting in the API load balancer or API uh, entry points, which listen to the APIs which is accessed externally, and keep track of them. Other than that, there will be tools which can be integrated at the development stage, like Swagger, or developers use Postman. So there we could keep track of all the APIs which are developed by the developers and exposed to the internet. So using such tools to track API is very important. Like at Beagle, we understand that the APIs are backbones of modern applications, and securing them is crucial. So, and that's why we are focusing our efforts more on API security side to build testing capabilities of security API interfaces. Firstly, we believe in the concept of secure by design. This means we advocate for security to be an integral part of the entire API development lifecycle, rather than the afterthought. Uh, like a security consideration should start at the design stage and continue throughout the development and then deployment, and their regular operations. So and then we can understand the APIs, and they are dynamic. They evolve and they change, and new ones are being developed on time. So that's why we built our platform to adapt the dynamic environment. Every time you have to change your you make changes in API, and you want to do a penetration test against that the changes in the APIs. So you can in Beagle, you can import the Postman or Swagger collection directly and merge it with the existing API available inside Beagle security, and new test can be triggered and assess the API endpoints on potential vulnerabilities. And the other feature is like the API automation. Like most of the system will be flowing API sequences throughout the application. So we are trying to automate that use cases of the APIs, so that we can build our own abuse cases based on the API flow, and we can test them in a thorough manner, like like a human penetration tester do in a manual way.
Raja, the secure by design, while developing, make sure everything has been secure, documented, are all the ideal world stories. Okay. Unfortunately, even for the basic components of a software module itself, it has not been followed. Okay, because many organizations are struggling to understand which all applications or softwares are running within. Otherwise, that is why the audit of the software vendors are all getting into mess, because there is no control on what is being used. And so when the APIs came into picture, which is in popularity for the last many years, so many applications got developed. Everybody was excited the power of APIs. And the way I understand is that already there is a big mess of the number of APIs and vulnerable APIs in the environment. Ideally, organizations should take a stand to inventorize, even if using a third party service like yours, to go back and inventorize and validate all the APIs, and then define a standard or a process or a policy to say moving forward what should be the approach they take on that. Now, you earlier touched about the microservices, the and serverless environment and all of that, and now cloud is another major part of it. So initially it was a homogeneous cloud, now it is a heterogeneous cloud. So how much of this API thing changed with all this coming into picture?
Like microservices and serverless architecture, right?
Even the cloud, because when you are
Yeah.
doing a testing, do you look at cloud in a different from an on-prem environment?
Um, like most of the case, the APIs are developed in the cloud as of now. Like on-premise APIs are a risk inside building it itself. So currently the trend is like using microservices and serverless architecture. And it brought significant change in the API security landscape as well. Like by like in microservice architecture, it breaking down application into smaller chunks like independent services. And microservice architecture naturally lead to a separation of APIs. Maybe each services usually expose its own APIs. Normally a microservice will be accessing only that microservice will be accessing that the part of database which has access to. So if another microservice need access to that data which is handled by another microservice, there will be calling internal APIs in between. So while microservices can speed up the development and make applications more scalable and resilient, they can also increase the attack surface. Like each microservice will be exposing some APIs to the internet or internally. According to the report of Rapid7, organizations with microservices architecture are deploying 40% more APIs than they were doing it 1 year before. So server also in a serverless architecture perspective, serverless architecture present the similar situation. In serverless, your application is broken down into functions that run in response of an event or a trigger of an event, and each functions can be exposed as an API. So again, which end up in more APIs exposed. Each of them need to be secured, whether it is internal or external.
So, Raja, one question. I understand that vehicle security is in the automated the security assessment, application security assessment on that. So, being an automated, you don't have a constraint of 8-hour working or anything, because 24 into 7 your testing is happening, and you have all the checklists been covered also. But and API is one of the focus area you do. So, but on a traditional manual penetration testing, when you come with an application and say that, okay, can you do a testing, a gray box or a black box testing for me? How much of API level inventorizing and depth of API testing goes into that? Or is it something specifically the company has to say that you need to do this part, or is it a de facto within a penetration testing that goes in? I'm talking about the manual penetration testing part.
Normally, like in manual penetration testing case, like if we get an application, uh, uh, consider a web application which uses an API in the backend. So naturally, the API in the backend also come into the scope of the application security testing. So normally, um, uh, we test those APIs which is accessed by the web applications. So when it comes to the automation, normally other tools in the market will miss that. Like when we provide a web application for testing, an API which is used, maybe API dot the API dot application.com. So that will be used in the backend, which will not be taken into the consideration in the most case because which handled in another domain, or which uses multiple domains. Nowadays, in microservice architecture or the other type of architectures that uses multiple subdomains as well for each services. So most of the cases, these APIs are not considered in a normal VA tools. But what we try in bigger security is like a human-like automation, which identify the APIs and adds those APIs into the scope for web application security testing itself. But the problem with it is like it can only identify the APIs which is used by the web application. So that's why we introduced a separate section where we could import APIs, GraphQL endpoints, and APIs separately as an application. So the coverage will be high, and we don't miss any APIs which is uh, exposed or developed during the developer.
So, Rajat, I understand from the automated platform perspective. So, I'm going back again to the manual testing service, because typically, correct me if I'm going totally offline on this. Um, you put a scope saying 5 days or 7 days is my scope of testing an application. You earlier mentioned that there are around 100 APIs average in in a service. Now that also has various type of APIs, and then we have external APIs, internal APIs. The use cases of all this are changing, because we also mentioned, based on the API used, we also have what it can disclose, how much of damage it can do also changes. So by which the use case also is changing for the tester. How will it do the core application penetration testing or security assessment plus hundreds of API testing of various categories in that? So that is the reason I asked. Normally, when somebody goes and say, "Do me a manual penetration testing," is the entire comprehensive API, and they should also give a list of all the APIs documented back to you. So does it work that way, or should I be separately calling out and saying, "You do all this for API and give to me and take an additional scope for that"? How does it? So you don't have to, because I know that you are into completely automated. So there you are covering everything. But I'm just out of curiosity, how, just to understand how, because if the practice is not comprehensive, it is not covered, then there are so many applications already in production where this part is not covered.
Yep, like in manual penetration testing itself, like I mentioned, if we provide a web application and finding the APIs underneath it is only limited. Like the number of APIs or APIs which is exposed will not be identified, because only way to identify of the APIs which is not used or which is not listed in the application will be fuzzing. So when it's come to the manual penetration testing, we recommend to get the list of APIs from the developer team itself. Then only we can make sure that all APIs are tested properly
But the
and the
problem,
coverage.
Raja, but the problem that they don't have the list. Because in a typical scenario, developer attritions are also huge, or turnarounds are huge, and or even if it is an old application coming for testing, they don't have the inventory.
Yeah, that's the
So
problem here.
now a
Like,
manual tester, if he's saying prerequisite is to give an inventory, the whole through we were talking saying that there is no inventory.
yeah, that's the problem in there. Like, the assets are not monitored, and if the assets are missing, there is no way to find uh, for a manual penetration tester as well, because the only way to do to the that is test with all possible option that can be exposed, but it's not possible in a simple way. Like, fuzzing all the possible URLs will not be possible. So, without a proper inventory list, there will be gaps in the manual penetration testing as well.
So
So,
Raja, I think no, so many organizations may reach out to you saying to asking for a service to inventorize their APIs and to do an initial test to validate it and start from a clean state. So let me also ask you another question similar to that. You earlier mentioned this hundreds of APIs, multiple configuration possibilities where people make a lot of errors and all of that. So now there is a possibility of toxic combinations here because multiple applications, multiple misconfigurations all coming together where a extremely toxic combination which can lead to very disastrous impact for if it compromised, because in security now this toxic combination is now becoming a very common discussion between the practitioners, because we are seeing many areas if that and this comes together, then you are going to have a disaster. Okay, and AP is a classic candidate the way I understood when you explained. So how do you look at this toxic combinations?
the toxic combination, that issue is that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Um, the term referred to scenarios where individual API endpoints may not pose security risk as such, but it exposes pose vulnerability when it combined with another one, or run in a specific sequence. They can create vulnerability that could be exploited by attackers. So, this kind of security vulnerabilities can be particularly tricky to spot because standard testing methods may not catch them. Like, after all, if you are testing each API separately, they might all pass your security testing. But when it used together, they can expose sensitive data or allow unauthorized access. This is also, when it comes to the GraphQL APIs, this is more relevant when the user can create different kind of requests based on their requirements. So, there is a risk in there in the GraphQL APIs as well. Like, toxic combinations can be challenging to spot because they require a deep understanding of the API's business logic itself. Also, like I mentioned, coming to the automation again, traditional automated testing tools may not always detect these vulnerabilities because the combinations they can try. This is where advanced testing techniques and robust API security solution play key roles in this area, with the capabilities of performing rigorous testing that can mimic the complex attacker behaviors. So, from a security team's perspective, it is critical to ensure comprehensive API security testing strategies that go beyond just testing individual APIs endpoints. That's why I mentioned earlier, like, Beagle has an option to arrange the sequences of the APIs and use the data, um, which we get on the from the previous APIs, like creating an API automation sequence to mimic the use cases or the business logic of the application, which can help Beagles or Beagle intelligent part of it to identify the combinations of the APIs and test the toxic combinations as well. And that automation part, still we are in the development process, and most probably will be releasing it in this quarter.
So the way I understand is that individually it may pass through, but
Yes.
business logic wise, context wise, and the combination wise, when we look at it, can be dangerous on that. Now, a basic question: how does the stakeholders, when I say stakeholders, security practitioners, developers, the organizational teams, do they understand the risk associated with the APIs, or is it still in a evolving state?
Uh, I think organizations are noticing the increased attack vector, attack surface due to APIs as of now, and we got, as a company, we get lot of requests regarding the API security side, as we are one of the best automated security testing platform for APIs now available in the market. So we're getting a lot of requests in the API testing side. So I think everybody is aware of the risk exposed with the APIs, and they are trying to cope up with the changes that occur in the API side as well. Like most of the cases, when it's come to the APIs, the main problem is like applications are built in the separate teams. Like most cases, the APIs are used by a mobile application. The mobile application will be developed by a team, and the API is developed by another team. So when it's come to the when an application is when anybody requests for a mobile application security testing, they will be testing the application side of it, and they can test only the APIs which they could identify from the mobile application. So the rest of the APIs which is maybe exposed in the backend and not used by the application is still not tested. So many of them won't test the API separately before, but nowadays I see requests to do the API security testing separately. And main problem with this is the inventory. As I mentioned earlier, getting all the list of APIs which is developed by a team is still not possible, and many tools and other options are available to monitor the APIs in the real time. Like whenever an API exposes sensitive information, that can be monitored with a real-time monitoring tool. But even that APIs are not tested for security side of it. Other than data leaking in the real time, nobody tests possibilities of vulnerabilities in that each API.
Raja,
So
I felt there is a gap on that, on the way
yes.
people understand the API, because everybody understands the benefits of API, but the risk, and although it is a small code, how much of damage it could do, I think that appreciation is slightly lagging. That was the reason I actually requested for such a session where we could openly chat on the foundational part of it, saying that what is an API also. So now let me, almost we are reaching to the time. So let me ask you one final question. How does vehicle security look at API assessment? And also, do you have or any tester, do they have a checklist saying that these are the 10 checks or 20 checks or whatever that number is you do on API? And is that a transparent thing you give to your customer, saying that when we do an API testing, we make sure or we confirm that all these approaches are being tested on that? How does it work?
Like
Both on your
OWASP,
service and the testing process.
in a checklist perspective, OWASP API top 10 will be the best one to start with. But as I mentioned, it won't cover everything, but 80% of the common vulnerabilities will be covered by that checklist. So following that will be a best practice to start with. But a comprehensive API security testing is mandatory before the release. Otherwise, the possibilities are like exposing internal data and unencrypted data kind of things will be happening, and which will be unnoticed, I think. So a comprehensive testing is mandatory, and in Beagle's perspective, uh, we have been working to improve the capabilities of API security testing for from the beginning itself. Like when we did the human-like automation for web application, so it's like we can test any heterogeneous applications with Beagle. But at that point, uh, the API was missing. The same problem, like addressing the inventory, missing inventories with the application side. That's why we thought of implementing this separate API security side, and ask customers or the security team to import the list of APIs which can be tested in a thorough way, with the automated penetration testing itself. Um,
Raja,
yeah,
I am fully aware of Beagle Security's capability on automated security assessment and also on API security. And that is the reason I reached out to you asking whether we can do an API security session on as a casual chat to discuss on various perspectives on that part. We are I think slightly over time. Nandaguma, are there any questions? Because few of the questions which came out I tried addressing or taking answers from Raja. Are there anything which is missed out? Okay, Raja, can you see Neeraj on his thing? What is the way to monitor API for unauthorized usage of PII data or sensitive data? Along with one more question, I understand API is a dynamic thing where a lot of changes happen. So when Neeraj is asking about monitoring API for unauthorized usage, I'm also adding this question saying that how do we look at the frequent changes on API? How should the company monitor and assess on that?
Actually, there are most of the case currently APIs are exposed through a load balancer or a API interface in a cloud infrastructure like AWS or Azure. So there are tools which listen to these endpoints and mark or list all the inventories in a real-time way. That is the only way to monitor the information leakage or data which is exposed to an API in a dynamic situation. And with these tools, we can create the list on the go, like get the list of APIs and the parameters which is passed to it. Even even there are modules which is available for Nginx or Apache web servers, which can extract the request that's coming to the API, and with that we could create an asset inventory as well, but that require a proper tooling as well to get a list of APIs which is exposed to the endpoints. So if an application is exposed without a single uh, entry point, that is not possible. So what we have to do is like create single entry point for all APIs, and listen to that and extract the data which is passed to the APIs, and monitor and uh, limit if it's a PI information, maybe we could take action at that point as well. Maybe triggering web application firewalls to restrict that information, which if it's not passed in a secure way.
So, Nandakumar, are there any questions we missed out? Are you seeing the chats? Is there a way to enumerate or list after auto discovering APIs? This is from Shweta.
This is what I mentioned. Like there are tools which can do that. Like I mentioned, maybe if you are trying to do that on your own, you have to write modules for the web application file servers or the application API interfaces.
So, Raja, my view is that this may be very common queries people have it through Beagle Security website or your forums. You should actually write out few blocks on this type of queries so that a lot of people will have the similar one. Whether API security testing shall be performed separately or it should be performed at the time of conducting gray box. So I think I asked this question earlier and taken the answer from you on that. So we
I
are
think
almost, yeah, please.
I can give it the quick answer. Like it should be in the both ways. Like while testing the application, we should cover the APIs underneath it, and also we should test the APIs, complete API list of APIs, which is available by the developer team, to have a comprehensive API security testing, and also with the toxic combinations can be need to be tested. So the full list of APIs need to be tested in both black box and gray box level.
So Raja, Jyoti has asked a question saying, many applications moving to SaaS or to cloud, the importance of API become more predominant, is it not? So I think you
Oh,
mentioned this saying that the
yeah,
microservices, the communication, the attack surface is going extremely high
going high. So
on
it's
that.
getting its importance on the go. Like it's the importance of doing API securities testing or real-time monitoring is increased, and it should be increasing on the go as well. Like nowadays, almost all applications are developed in such a way that it's APIs in the backend and applications in the front end, because that APIs can be used both for web applications, mobile applications, and if any other communication happens between the applications or services. So API nowadays almost all applications are built in that way. So API security testing is importance of it is only increased, and it will be there.
So always, Raja, we are almost an hour plus. Always, every interaction with you, a lot of insights and learnings. This session also, I'm going back with a lot of new understanding of APIs. And I feel that every organization should consider API security also as one of their priorities to look after. And thank you for everybody who attended this session. And always feel free to write to Rajah or Rahim on related topic. Rajah, any closing words from your side?
Thanks for hosting me and, and allow me to explain my thoughts on the API security and Beagle's perspective as well. Yep. Thanks for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Have a good evening.
Thanks. Have a good day.